Under the warm glow of festival lanterns, two students sit side by side on the curb, looking out at the street while talking about a future 10 years away when they will finally be 20 years old. The girl talks about being able to drink and smoke, hoping that by then they will feel truly glad to be alive and prove their worth to everyone who has looked down on them. The boy quietly adds that they might even be married by then, though he thinks that might happen even sooner. But as the moment continues, a quiet doubt begins to appear. The boy looks down and admits that he doesn't feel like he will actually be able to make it that far because there is simply too much in his life that he doesn't like. Right beside them, the girl's backpack rests on the ground, covered with cruel insults and hateful graffiti like "Go die" and "Ugly." Even with the bullying they clearly face, the girl just lets out a small laugh and admits that she feels the exact same way. The lively sounds of the festival continued around them, but their world remained small and private as they sat quietly together. The girl began imagining another possibility for their future, one where both of them managed to find success and fame by the time they reached 20. After a brief hesitation, she admitted that what she was about to say might sound a little shameful, but she still wanted to suggest a pact between them. With her cheeks slightly flushed, she looked at him and asked what would happen if neither of them found someone they wanted to marry by then. She wondered if, as two people left on the shelf and cast aside by the rest of the world, he would want to be with her, leaving the air between them still as the weight of her question quietly lingered. The silence between them grows heavy, both of their faces turning deep red as the weight of the proposal hangs in the warm summer air. The boy looks at her with wide, startled eyes while the girl keeps her gaze lowered. Trying to break the awkwardness, the girl speaks with a small playful smile and says it was just a joke, telling him to forget she ever said it. The boy lets out an embarrassed sigh and wonders where that sudden thought even came from, both of them retreating back into the safety of their friendship. As they look out over the lantern-lit festival again, the girl quietly admits to herself that she only wanted to hear those words out loud, while the boy holds onto his pride, believing there is no way someone like him would ever truly go unsold. Years pass, and the boy from that summer night becomes a young man now facing the harsh realities of adulthood. Working a part-time job under the blazing sun, he bows deeply again and again, sweat pouring down his face as he delivers his 19th apology of the day. His body and spirit clearly worn down by the exhausting routine of the service industry. Eventually the heat becomes too much to bear, and while trying to keep up with his tasks, the world suddenly begins to spin. A sharp wave of dizziness hits him without warning, his strength gives out, and the mugs he is carrying crash to the pavement and shatter loudly. As people around him stare in shock, his vision blurs, and he collapses unconscious onto the scorching ground. Later, the young man sits alone in the silence of his small apartment, slumped against the wall as bright sunlight pours through the window behind him, only making the emptiness of the room feel heavier. Sitting on the floor, he stares blankly at his phone, where a message from his manager acknowledges the rough day he had yesterday and tells him to take some time off to rest, though the supportive words only remind him of how fragile he feels right now. Running a hand through his messy hair, he looks completely drained, his sunken eyes carrying a deep exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. In this quiet moment, the dreams he once shared under the festival lights feel far away, replaced by the crushing weight of an adulthood he is struggling to handle. Looking for something to eat, he opens the refrigerator door only to find the shelves completely empty, leaving him staring blankly into the cold space. With a tired sigh, he slams the door shut, the sound echoing through the quiet apartment. He then checks his wallet, but inside are only a few lonely coins. Just to have even that much, he has already sold his cherished CDs and books, a painful reminder that he is slowly giving up pieces of himself just to survive another day. He looks back at the small collection he still has left, rows of books and stacks of CDs that once served as his only escape. None of them are new or expensive, since every single one was bought secondhand, but they are still precious to him because each purchase was made carefully, weighing his few coins against the small happiness they could bring. Overwhelmed by hunger and exhaustion, he slowly collapses onto the floor, lying there with his arms spread out while a small electric fan nearby spins weakly in the still air. Staring up at the ceiling with dark, sunken eyes, he feels the heavy weight of his reality, realizing that even the smallest joys he once held onto are slowly being stripped away just to keep him going. The young man slowly sits back up, his apartment feeling smaller and emptier than ever as he looks around the barren room, realizing he doesn't even own a TV or computer left to sell. In his situation, the second-hand books and CDs he carefully chose over the years are the only things he still has of any value, the last items he can trade for the money he needs to survive. With quiet resignation, he begins gathering the rest of his collection, placing each book and disc into his bag with a heavy heart, as if letting go of pieces of his past. When everything is packed, he steps into the cramped entryway, opens the door without a word, and walks out, heading back into the world to trade his final comforts for a little more time. Walking down a long, sun-drenched road, the young man carries the final remnants of his hobbies in 2 heavy paper bags. The quiet neighborhood filled only with the distant hum of the city and the soft rustling of the bags against his legs as he passes the railway tracks with a tired, determined stride. Suddenly, he stops in his tracks, his breath catching as sweat forms on his forehead, not just from the heat but from a sudden realization. Staring ahead with wide, confused eyes, something in the distance pulls him out of his thoughts and makes the world around him feel strangely unfamiliar. Unable to trust what he is seeing, he sets the bags down on the sidewalk and shields his eyes from the harsh sunlight, leaning forward and squinting toward the tracks as his desperate errand fades from his mind, replaced by pure shock at the unexpected sight before him. The young man finally reaches a quiet second-hand bookstore, tucked away from the main road, and slowly slides the wooden door open, the rattling sound breaking the still afternoon silence. As he steps inside, he is met with a deep quiet, surrounded by towering shelves packed with countless books that stretch toward the ceiling, filling the dim shop with the weight of forgotten stories. For a moment, he simply stands there, clutching the bags tightly against his chest, feeling small among the endless rows. Then, gathering himself, he walks further inside and softly calls out a greeting, his voice barely a murmur, before quietly explaining that he has come to sell his books, the last things he has left. From behind the counter, an elderly man with sharp, observant eyes looks up from the books he is sorting, his attention caught by the unexpected visitor who has broken the shop's quiet. The young man approaches and drops one of his heavy bags onto the counter with a dull thud, standing there awkwardly as a bead of sweat rolls down his face, his posture showing both exhaustion and nervous tension. The shopkeeper glances at the bulging bags and then back at him, his expression unreadable behind his round glasses. After a brief silence, he adjusts his frames and studies the young man carefully before asking if he is moving away or something, noticing the large number of items he is bringing in. But the young man says nothing, unable to explain that these bags are not just belongings, they are the last things he has left to hold his life together. The young man quietly shakes his head, explaining that he isn't moving, admitting that the situation isn't something as simple as a change of address. Looking down at the stacks of books he is about to give up, he makes a grim, self-deprecating remark that paper doesn't make for a very good meal and that books unfortunately have very little nutritional value. The shopkeeper watches him carefully, the meaning behind those words sinking in as he questions why the young man would do something so wasteful, clearly sensing the desperation behind the sale. Noticing the hollow look in the boy's eyes, the old man lets out a quiet sigh, realizing he is simply another person struggling with a lack of money, and tells him it will take about 30 minutes to evaluate the collection, leaving the young man to wait while his final belongings are counted. With 30 minutes to wait, the young man steps outside and stands in front of the old bookstore, the quiet neighborhood pressing in around him as he waits to learn the value of the collection that once meant everything to him. His eyes wander until they stop at a small community bulletin board where a bright poster advertises an upcoming fireworks festival, its bursting lights sharply contrasting with the dull reality of his life. He stares at it for a long moment under the heavy summer sun, then slowly looks up at the clear blue sky and the tall utility poles, standing there in a quiet daze as the festival poster stirs a distant memory of a time when summer nights were filled with dreams rather than desperation. After the wait is over, the young man returns to the counter and is met with a harsher reality than he expected. On the tray sit only a few lonely coins and a receipt, the small amount his entire collection is worth. He stares at the paper in silence, his eyes wide and empty as the realization sinks in that the things he once cherished have been reduced to little more than pocket change. Slowly and mechanically, he drops the coins into his wallet, ready to leave with nothing left to his name. But just as he turns to go, the old shopkeeper calls out to him, breaking the silence and telling him he has something important to share. The shopkeeper speaks bluntly, asking the young man directly if he is short on money. With a tired, resigned expression, the boy admits that his struggle with money is nothing new. It has been a part of his life for a long time. However, the old man quickly cuts off any room for sympathy, stating that he has no interest in the details of the boy's poverty or how his life ended up this way, because the reasons simply don't matter to him. Remaining calm and detached, he leans forward slightly, his sharp eyes watching the young man from behind his glasses as he says he only has one thing he wants to ask, leaving the boy standing there in silent anticipation among the crowded shelves of books. The narrow aisle of the bookstore suddenly feels colder, the silence growing heavy among the towering shelves of forgotten stories as the young man hears a question that makes no sense at all. The shopkeeper doesn't ask for more books or CDs. Instead, he calmly makes a strange and unsettling proposal, looking the boy straight in the eye and asking if he wants to sell some of his lifespan. After already selling nearly everything he owns just to survive, the young man now finds himself being offered money for the very time he has left to live, the chilling offer hanging in the silent shop like a far darker bargain than he ever expected. The words hang in the air, cold and impossible, leaving the young man frozen as he struggles to process what he just heard. Lifespan? He repeats quietly, a cold sweat forming on his forehead as the idea feels too unreal to understand. The shopkeeper calmly nods, confirming that he heard correctly and explaining that he isn't the one buying it, but he knows that a person's remaining years can be sold for a large amount of money. He speaks with an unsettling calm, as if discussing the price of a book instead of the length of a human life. Noticing the disbelief on the young man's face, the old man admits he wouldn't blame him for thinking it's a joke or that he has lost his mind. Yet his sharp, serious gaze never wavers, leaving the boy standing in silence and wondering if this impossible escape from his misery could actually be real. As the young man walks away, the shopkeeper's strange offer continues to echo in his mind. The old man hadn't forced the idea on him, only saying that if he wanted to see the truth for himself, he could simply follow a few instructions, promising that once he arrived, he would realize it wasn't just the rambling of a senile old man. The directions remain clear in his memory. On the 4th floor of a nearby building, there is a hidden shop that actually trades in lifespan. With exhaustion written across his face, he quietly thinks about the impossible idea, because for someone who has already sold nearly everything he owns, a place like that doesn't sound like a myth, it sounds like a final, desperate chance to survive. The old man then explains the unsettling logic behind this secret market, saying that the price of a life isn't fixed and can change drastically from person to person. According to him, the value is determined by one haunting question: how rich would the life you would have lived been? It isn't about how many years someone has left, but about the potential meaning and happiness those years could hold, meaning a life filled with success and joy would be worth a fortune, while a life of hardship would be worth far less. Looking the young man over, the shopkeeper admits he doesn't know him well, but remarks that the boy seems to have decent taste in books and doesn't look like a bad person, suggesting in a cold, matter-of-fact way that his life might still hold some value. He even adds that lifespan isn't the only thing the mysterious shop buys, they are also willing to purchase a person's time and health. The young man can only stand there in stunned silence, his eyes fixed as the realization sinks in that his future, his vitality, and even the days he has left to live could be measured and sold just like the second-hand books on the counter. Curiosity appears in the young man's eyes as he asks what the difference is between selling one's time and selling their lifespan. The shopkeeper can only shrug vaguely while writing something on a small slip of paper, admitting that he can't explain the details because he has never been desperate enough to try it himself. After finishing, the old man simply hands him the paper, and the young man stares at the scribbled directions with an uncertain expression, holding what might be an impossible solution to his problems. Leaving the bookstore, he walks past the quiet buildings with the paper in his pocket, trying to convince himself that the whole thing is nonsense, just the strange rambling of an old man nearing the end of his life. Yet, even while doubting it, the thought refuses to leave his mind, because for someone who has nothing left, a place like that almost feels like a miracle. The oppressive heat continues to wear him down as he stops in front of a glowing vending machine, his throat dry and a bead of sweat rolling down his face while he stares at the rows of drinks behind the glass. Even a single bottle of water feels like a luxury he cannot afford, the bright lights only reminding him of the few coins left in his pocket. Slumped with exhaustion and hunger, he hesitates, knowing that every coin is a lifeline and spending even one for brief relief feels like a risky choice. Later, he walks past a large record market, the building standing quietly in the fading daylight and reminding him of the CDs he was forced to sell earlier. As he continues down the street, the weight of his poverty feels heavier than ever, making the strange idea of selling his lifespan feel less like a fantasy and more like an unavoidable path. The young man eventually stops at the record market, where the bright lights of the shop sharply contrast with his exhausted state. As he steps inside, a young clerk with light hair greets him with a polite, professional smile. Without much explanation, The young man lifts the heavy paper bag he is carrying and places it on the counter, his voice flat as he simply gestures toward it and says he is here to sell these. The clerk's cheerful expression slowly fades as he looks inside the bag and sees the stacks of CDs and DVDs, his face turning more serious as a quiet silence settles between them while he begins examining the collection. The store clerk looks at him in confusion, clearly shocked by the large number of CDs being handed over at once. With a puzzled expression, he wonders what kind of situation could make someone sell such a big collection all at once. The reaction feels familiar to the young man, reminding him of the old man at the bookstore who also couldn't understand why he was giving up so much. Seeing the silent questions in the clerk's eyes, the young man once again finds himself explaining his situation, speaking with quiet exhaustion as he describes the harsh reality that has left him with no choice but to sell the last of his belongings just to survive. As the clerk looks through the collection, his expression softens when he realizes the quality of the CDs, even admitting that he shares a similar taste in music with the young man, creating a brief moment of connection despite the grim situation. Noticing how desperate the boy seems, the clerk lowers his voice and leans closer, saying he has something good to share but that it must stay strictly between them. His tone becomes serious as he admits he probably shouldn't even mention it, yet the situation in front of him changes his mind. Then, in a quiet whisper that feels both shocking and strangely familiar, he tells the young man the same thing the old bookstore owner said, that somewhere in this town there is a hidden place where people can actually sell their lifespan for money. The coincidence hits hard, turning what once sounded like the rambling of a senile old man into something disturbingly real. The clerk's explanation sounds almost identical to what the old bookstore owner had said, making the impossible idea feel strangely consistent, as if this man might have actually gone through with it and sold some of his own lifespan. A wave of bitter skepticism crosses the young man's mind, making him wonder if this is just some cruel joke people play on the poor. Even so, the promise of an escape from his crushing poverty is too tempting to ignore, so he cautiously asks how much a life is actually worth. The clerk only gives a small knowing smile and says he can't reveal that information. Instead, he writes something on a small piece of paper and hands it to him, saying, "Here you go." The young man takes the paper with a blank expression, realizing that the directions once again lead to the same place, the mysterious fourth floor that might be his final hope. He holds the two hand-drawn maps side by side, tracing the lines with his fingers and realizing they are exactly the same. It can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Two different strangers have pointed him to the same hidden place. With the small amount of money he just earned from selling his last belongings, he finally buys a drink from a vending machine, the heavy clunk of the can dropping echoing in the quiet street. As the cold metal touches his palm, a brief sense of relief cuts through the summer heat, grounding him for a moment. Staring at the can, his expression turns firm. If he is really going to follow this impossible idea, he might as well do it today. With a sharp PSH, he opens the drink, the sound marking the end of his hesitation as he prepares to follow the directions in his hand. He gulps down the cold soda, the sugary drink giving his exhausted body a brief spark of energy as he empties the can completely before tossing it toward a nearby bin with a dull clatter. The small relief quickly fades, and he pulls the two maps from his pocket again, staring at the identical directions while the strange proposal weighs heavily on his mind. Looking up at the wide evening sky, he stands there in quiet thought, caught between the absurdity of the idea and the harsh reality of his life. Finally, he clicks his tongue in frustration and crushes the empty can in his hand, the metal crunching under his grip as his hesitation disappears. With nothing left to lose and his pride already gone, he turns away from the vending machines and begins walking toward the mysterious destination waiting for him. In the end, his steps bring him to the exact location shown on the two identical maps. He stands at the base of an ordinary, weathered concrete building, its gray walls stretching up toward the cloudy sky, looking completely normal from the outside. Staring up at the rows of balconies and windows, it is hard to believe that something so strange could be hidden inside such an unremarkable place. His expression remains empty as he looks at the entrance, a quiet resignation settling over him. With no room left for doubt and nothing else to lose, he prepares to head to the fourth floor, determined to find out if he can truly trade his remaining years for a chance to keep living. Stepping into the dim hallway of the building, the young man faces a long, narrow staircase stretching upward into the shadows. As he climbs, his breathing grows heavier and sweat gathers on his forehead. Even now, he doesn't truly believe the story about selling one's lifespan. Instead, he tries to make sense of it in a more realistic way, convincing himself that the clerks were speaking in metaphors and that the fourth floor probably offers some kind of dangerous but high-paying job. In his mind, it must be the kind of work so risky and exhausting that it could shorten a person's life. Holding on to this grim explanation, he keeps climbing, desperate enough to accept any danger if it means escaping the crushing weight of his poverty. Finally reaching the top of the stairs, the young man arrives on the fourth floor, still clinging to the belief that the strangers had simply pointed him towards some dangerous but profitable job. Walking down the quiet hallway, he stops in front of a door labeled 401, sweat forming on his forehead as the weight of the moment settles in. His face shows both exhaustion and quiet unease, yet he knows there is no going back to the empty life he left behind. With a slow, steady motion, he grabs the metal handle, and a sharp click echoes through the silent corridor as the lock gives way. He pushes the door open and stands in the doorway, staring into the darkness beyond, ready to face whatever reality waits inside the place where time itself is said to be a currency. As he steps through the doorway, the scene before him is nothing like the shady office he expected. Instead, the room looks surprisingly elegant and professional, with tall wooden bookshelves and polished glass display counters arranged across a neat checkered floor. Under the soft glow of a hanging light, the place feels more like a quiet boutique or private library than a suspicious workplace. But as he looks closer, a chilling detail becomes clear. The shelves are completely bare, and the glass cases are entirely empty, with no books, products, or items anywhere in sight. Standing in the center of the room, the young man freezes in shock, his eyes moving across the silent, spotless space as confusion washes over him, unable to understand what kind of shop could exist in a place that seems to sell absolutely nothing. While he stands there trying to understand the empty room, a calm voice suddenly breaks the silence. Startled, he quickly turns toward the sound, his heart likely racing as a young woman steps out from the shadows and greets him with a simple, polite welcome. She looks completely ordinary, dressed in a neat professional suit and glasses, her expression calm and unreadable. Nothing about her seems threatening, yet her presence in this silent, empty shop feels strangely unsettling. The young man can only stare at her in silence, sweat still on his face, and his tense posture revealing just how out of place he feels in this quiet, clinical space. Without any small talk, the woman gets straight to the point. Looking at him through her glasses, she calmly explains that the shop deals in only three things: his time, his health, or his lifespan. The words are spoken so casually that the impossible begins to feel like a normal business transaction. The young man's heart pounds as the reality of the situation sinks in, and sweat runs down his temple as he realizes he is no longer just searching for help. He is standing in a place where people sell parts of their own lives. The silence grows heavy as he struggles with the weight of the choice, until he finally takes a shaky breath and speaks in a quiet voice, confirming that he has come here to sell the most valuable thing he has left: his lifespan.